discussing use internally.
Hello.
Okay, just getting in.
Okay.
Just getting in. Okay, super.
Should we promote our CB members?
Oh, yeah, sure. Oh, he did, surely.
Hi, Dr. Shirley.
Hi, how are you both?
Good.
Thank you.
Good. Good.
The paperwork and.
Hey guys, I just want to say hi, but I'm on
it's
another
okay.
Zoom.
We're not holding
so
the developers to the
I'll be back.
restriction.
Okay.
So like 810 square foot.
Okay. Hi, Susan.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
I'm Mara, I'm Patricia,
Hi.
Katie, Shirley, Carter.
Oh, I can.
Susan. Hi, Susan.
Hi, oh, I'm sorry. Hi, Shirley. Nice photo.
Thanks.
Just waiting for people to join in. Hey, buddy.
Hello, how are you?
Hi. Hi. Hey, Anthony.
Hello.
Hi. We're just waiting for a few more people to join in. But another few minutes. And other people are in other meetings and are going to be joining in late. It's the first meeting after that brief holiday we had. So it's not going to be many people. Okay. See who else is on.
All right. We need to elevate Donna.
I think just did.
Okay.
So should we get started, Mark? Because
Yes.
Amy said she'll join in at 6.
All right.
I
Well,
don't see Susan.
right. So, and
Should we
I don't see Bob Eli. We could start with SLA if Donna is so inclined.
It doesn't, I'm sitting in my car because my internet is out again. So it doesn't matter to me if you want to wait and see if Bob joins in a few minutes, or we can go ahead. Up to you.
Okay. Patricia, what do you think?
Let's see, who else? What time?
Shirley's not, and I know Valerie's at the airport, right? So
Right, yeah.
Valerie is running late, and Susanna is not going to be with us till just after 6.
okay.
So,
Should I text Bob and see if he's getting
Yeah.
on?
well, somebody text Bob and see, and also Shirley.
Yeah.
I don't have Shirley. This is Katie. I can text Bob.
Okay,
If you
well,
could-
I don't have Shirley.
Oh, can you do that from your phone at the same time? Oh, you can. I'm so not used to doing this by my phone. So,
Oh, okay.
okay. I can text Bob too.
Might I suggest, committee ladies, that you get started?
yes, we're going to get started. I'm just shooting an email to Shirley. Yeah, Patricia, do you want to start with the first slide, our agenda?
Well, let me introduce our committee for, does everyone know who everyone's, yeah, I guess everyone knows everyone here. Well, I'll just say hi to all of our working group members that I see present. Mar, myself, Katie Bordenaro,
Hello.
Betty Kavobi Weiss, Sandy Russo,
Hi.
Anthony.
Yes, hello.
Hi, Akila Asqui, and Matt Metzger. So Amy will join in after 6. So welcome, everyone. The agenda is a presentation of CB2 Committee Processes and Protocols. The first up will be traffic and transportation. Well, the first is going to be a change of order because I don't see Shirley on. Or
Oh, Bob is waiting to be let in. He's in the waiting room.
oh,
Who is doing admin?
it's Carter.
But he dipped out for his other meeting.
All right.
Yeah, Bob's not, he's got to sign in.
Permanent.
He says he's in the Carter, he told
There
me
is
he's in
no
the
waiting
waiting room.
We don't have a waiting room.
He's on the wrong Zoom.
Oh,
He's
maybe.
wrong Zoom link, I think.
He might be on the one from yesterday.
Oh, okay.
I'll
Someone-
send him the link.
Yeah, let's just send him the link.
Okay, so then are we starting with
Yeah,
SLA
he
1
is
and
on
2?
the other one. I just got a confirmation.
Okay, though we'll start with SLA 1 and 2, then traffic,
Okay.
social services reopening working group, followed by discussion of CB policies through an equity lens. Next slide, Mark. Meeting protocol. Please be respectful to whoever is speaking. If you have a different view, ask a question or raise your hand. Please do not type derogatory comments in the Q&A. Attendees will be on mute until Q&A. Please submit questions to the chat or raise hand. Attendees will be on mute until Q&A, but may have an opportunity to speak during the public session. Due to time constraints, we may not be able to answer all questions. Please abide by Q&A norms. Next slide.
Oh, I lost my slides. Here we go. So we're gonna go to SLA. Here we go.
So, do you want to do that one, Mar?
Sure. The first committee operations that we are going to look at tonight is liquor licensing. Committees 1, liquor licensing 1 and liquor licensing 2, SLA 1 and SLA 2. Since COVID, both committees have been meeting together. Now that we're virtual, we're able to do that. Usually the volume of applications, and we split up the district and we do west of 6th Avenue usually, and then east of 6th Avenue, restaurants, bars, nightclubs, anybody who needs or wants a liquor license to operate. Donna is with us this evening.
And Bob.
Oh, is he here?
Is
Yes.
Bob on?
Great. Okay. Do you guys want to tell us a little about SLA 1 and 2 and what the work you do there?
Okay. Bob, I don't have the piece of paper in front of me of what he wrote down. So Bob, is he on?
Yeah,
What do we
he's
got
on.
here?
Bob, are you there?
You're asking
you
just in
have
general
any-
what we do?
Yes.
Okay, yes, in general, what we do is every month we receive 30-day notices, which is required by the State Liquor Licensing Authority, which is a state agency, which governs the New York City as well as other areas, other cities in New York in terms of liquor licensing. And as a requirement of that 30-day notice, that gives us, as it says, 30 days to review a license. That's the technicality. Usually we have a little bit more time than that because there's a little bit more to it than it takes in 30 days, and we only meet once every 30 days as a community board. So we review various types of applications, an alteration to an existing on-premise liquor. So there's different types of liquor licenses, on-premise, beer and wine. There's alterations to those existing licenses. We hear all the applications. And we generally produce a resolution when there's a vote by the committee. We have a questionnaire, and we have instructions on how to do this on our website. Generally speaking, most applications the applicants are represented by lawyers who are familiar with liquor licensing. Those would be the same lawyers that go up to the State Liquor Authority and would present the application up there. We, as a community board, give a recommendation. That's part of the 30-day notice. So after we give a recommendation, we send that off to the State Liquor Authority. And, that recommendation is important. They do not have to follow our recommendation, but at the same time, they often do. That's pretty much it that I could think of.
Okay. All right, good. So do you want to go to another slide, Mar, and show opportunities that meet the diverse community? Okay.
So we spoke with the chairs of the committees that we were looking at this evening. We spoke yesterday, and we talked about ways to increase equity and to look at our operations through an equity lens. And if you look at this slide, there are a few things that we came up with in talking to, these chairs. I don't know, you guys jump in whenever you want. One of the first things was the questionnaire. There is a questionnaire that we pose to all applicants that lives on our website. And we thought that maybe updating those questions and asking questions that might inspire applicants to look at their plan through an equity lens might be a good thing to do. One of those things was asking if they were going to have a dress code, right? What was the other thing? And there was another one.
It was the private parties, the number of private parties, where you're holding private parties, how often. The other one was, do you have a diversity program in your organization? And are you
for purposes of hiring? For purposes of hiring,
and then also, do you look to the local pool when you're hiring to see if there are people in the community that you could be hiring? I think.
Great,
Correct?
that was everything. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those were the questions that we came up with because, you know, I sit on SLA as well, and these are things that have come up, you know, over the last, you know, few months that I've been on, that sometimes venues use things like a dress code or private party to keep out certain kinds of people or certain people. And if we ask that question up front, it gives us an opportunity to examine that. You know, do you have a dress code? Why do you have a dress code? What do you hope to achieve with the dress code? If you're having a private party, because a lot of the time we ask how many private parties, and we really, I think, you know, recommend not too many, right? But, you know, sometimes you'll walk up to a venue and they'll say, oh, private party, even if it's not. So this is a way not only to determine the point of these policies, but also to get the applicant to think about these policies and the effects of these policies on the public.
You know, Maura, as you were saying that, I was just thinking to go more into the private parties. One of the other things we could be asking is, how do you let people know about when there's a private party? Like a lot of places will put a note on the day before, we'll be closed tomorrow night, you know, which might be something worth asking.
That's awesome.
Because then they can't just say there's a private party if they have some way of posting when they're doing that, if it's taking up the whole space.
I think that's a great idea. That is something else we should definitely
give notice to have a private party. That way it's public information.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Right.
Yeah.
I see that Dr. Shirley, she's also on SLA 1, I believe, or 2. She has a question. Should we take her question now?
Sure.
Dr. Shirley, go ahead.
Thank you. I think Bob did a good job of generally speaking about what SLA does. I think what he forgot to mention is that we also give an agreement that they have to sign, a stipulation agreement that the applicant has to sign that pretty much sets the parameters by which the business should operate. Although, you know, we are not the enforceable unit, but we do, you know, they do tend to hopefully do what it is. The applicants usually try to abide rather by the stipulations that they agree to at the meeting. And of course, when they don't, the neighbors will definitely let us know. I think it's kind of important too, to kind of give some background too. I've been on, as I look at who's on this call and who has been on the committee for a while. I happen to be on at 1 and 2, and have been on it for a while. It would have been really great, I think, if we had done something like this in the past, but better late than never is what I say, because I felt we had a very unfortunate race-based situation with an applicant in Soho a while back. And the people who really didn't want the restaurant sent notices around to the people in the neighborhood that it was going to be a hip hop place. Although these were reputable applicants who had had a business establishment in Chelsea for many, many years without.
Really, which was that? I'm sorry. Could you refresh our memory?
What do you mean, the name of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. You were not on the SL.
Oh, okay, that's what I remember.
That's why I'm just,
But just to Shirley's point, it's almost every single person on.
Oh, really?
On this call, as well as it was me being on the SLA committee, or maybe right at the beginning, Shirley. I can't remember the dates, but just to put it in perspective.
I think it was a little prior to you coming on, but you came on shortly afterwards.
That's right. Yeah.
Carter. But anyway, it was quite apparent that it was race-based because, in fact, I saw the flyer. They gave me one of them, the business owners, when they found out some of the people in the neighborhood were quite concerned because, of course, the word hip hop, we already know that's a genre that basically young people of color have, and it is a different, it's their music, like we all had our music when we were young ourselves. But that was a real deterrent to these people actually being able to really open their restaurant. And of course, when they went to, and it was all done basically by people, I think, the people in the neighborhood, I don't think they were aware that they were kind of misled by a couple of people in the neighborhood who really did not want that kind of space, although they thought it was hip hop. The prior application had been a sit-down restaurant with no problems at all. So if we had something like this now, and I think what's good about us getting to a point where we do think in terms of the criticality of looking at people from a diverse kind of group of folk, and are they treated differently than others? And so I just thought I wanted to bring that up just for history, because I think that also what we're doing tonight, if we can kind of thrash out these kinds of things, I think it's a great idea to talk about generally what these committees do and then look at it through a lens of equity. I think it's a very good thing. So I'm encouraged by it, but I can tell you I was extremely concerned. And those people went bankrupt too, by the way. And it was so sad that they could not have their restaurant. They opened it, but then there were lots of back and forth, and it could have been a different outcome, I think, if we had more people who would be sort of like sensitive to all kinds of restaurants, at least giving people a chance and not prejudging people based on either music or who they think the customers are going to be.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Shirley. I mean, what we're talking about here really is encouraging the operators to, be more diverse in their operations, but also, inspiring community to be supportive of diverse businesses is something else. I mean, we know that when an application comes and the neighbors don't want it for whatever reason, they organize, these block associations organize, and they make sure that people come and speak out against. But that was something else that we talked about yesterday with Bob and Donna, community outreach, right? Perhaps in that instance, if more of the community knew what was happening rather than the, vocal few who didn't want the space, perhaps it would have, balanced the community response and given more support to those people. So speaking of community outreach, how do people find out about meetings? We realize that maybe the community board to mailing list needs to be updated and expanded, beyond the people who have opted in via the website and, the city agencies we might email, or the block associations that we routinely email, or the notices, that people might see on a lamppost. Maybe engaging community groups like our local PTAs or social service organizations or religious institutions, places where the community go to congregate. This could be a better way of getting the word out.
Or advertising to the bids or getting them involved somehow, right?
All right. So yes, so we talked about the ways we could do that. And we also talked about, and that might even speak to the story that Shirley just told, that sometimes applicants don't know that they really should come with petitions or with people to speak in favor of them and really to bring support. And I've seen people show up and not expect, community members to come and speak against them or not want them in their neighborhood. It wouldn't even occur to them that that might be the situation, and they aren't prepared. Creating an information page on our website, a cheat sheet, a liquor licensing cheat sheet, was something that we discussed and came up with and thought might be a good resource for the community to understand the process and for operators to be able to better follow the process. Also, a glossary of high frequency terms that could also live on our website. Bob Eli said that people often ask about, the 500-foot rule and what does it mean and how is it determined, and information like that would be great to share with applicants and with people just interested from the community. Do you guys want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would say that we're highly restricted by the notice issue because the 30-day notice doesn't give the important details. It gives some important details, but it doesn't give hours of operation, which is a big important detail. It kind of helps to define the on-premise liquor license for many, many people. And if they knew what the hours of operation were being proposed, they may not come out, or if they do know, then they will come out. And so, yes, the website is a great idea, and that's how we currently do it. But I don't think people in general even understand liquor licensing, much less are looking at Community Board 2's website. I think most people, that are not familiar with our community board, and that is the majority of people, get a notice by means of these postings in the block that Bob Gormley does, which is, I find, almost essential to getting the word out to people who aren't the typical, as you had indicated, that the people that are organized. And so what happens is that people who are unorganized become organized, or they realize they have to be organized usually after the fact. Things have already happened and now they're really upset. And so they become organized, and then they attend meetings, or they have other people attend meetings. So it's kind of a reaction to the lack of notification that creates what you kind of see at the SLA meetings often. And so, the 30-day notice and the liquor licensing doesn't require any of this stuff. We do it on our own because of equity, because the people that live in the neighborhoods need to know what's going on. And so we do not have enough time we're not given this information. So, the postings are critical, it seems to me, in terms of notice. And the earlier the postings can occur, the better off we are too, except that, people will tear them down. That happens a lot too. People will tear down the notifications or that are on the corners that Bob puts up. But it's what's in the notice. It's not necessarily that there is a notice. It's what's in the notification that will cause people to either be interested, concerned, or not concerned. And so if the notification just says a bland statement, oh, there's somebody seeking a liquor license at a certain location, people are not going to notice that. But if it says, oh, by the way, they want to have a nightclub there open till 4 a.m., that will catch people's, so that's a big deal. It's something that we've been trying to work on. It's not something that is easy to do because, like I said, we just don't get the information. And then all of a sudden we have to turn on a dime and get that information out to our website, which again, doesn't really, I don't think it notifies all the people that really need to be notified. That's all.
Agreed. And we should continue to think of ways to better reach the public with this information and in a timely manner. So we will work on that.
And we can also, we're in the process of working on the questionnaire. So the ideas about the questionnaire are really, really good ideas. So we're definitely going to implement that.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Does Dr. Smith have a question?
Yes, my hand is
Yep.
Not a question, but a comment. Also, too, I think what has to be revised, and we're talking about a lot of things that we want to do, but remember, we also have a very small staff at the office. And maybe if other people could volunteer to do some of it. So Bob goes around and put those notices up, and with all the other things that he has, I'm not sure if anybody else helps him. But the point I wanted to make at this gesture is that, you know, those block associations, sometimes that information probably needs to be updated. I haven't looked at the web to see what is on there as far as block associations go lately. But a lot of times things are listed and it's not current. And also we have to be very careful too, that we do not have one or two people who decided themselves that they speak for a community, or they speak for they speak for a building or a block. Normally when they come for a building, they will say so, but sometimes people take it upon themselves. I've seen it to represent their view and act as if they are speaking for other people, when sometimes it's been proven that they are not. So I just think that might be a suggestion to maybe make sure that we can kind of keep our block associations not only current, but to see if they really are active and whoever the president is, I think that name should be there too, so that people will know. So that's what I wanted to add as well for in relationship to the outreach.
And Shirley's right, because what happens is that oftentimes applicants, their lawyers will ask us, who should we reach out to? And, you know, is that up to the chairs to do all that extra work, when it is actually, if it's correlated and updated, you know, it could be there. The information could be there, and currently it's not. And so Shirley is 100% correct.
Have you looked at the list, Bob, or anybody? Because the list is there.
I've looked at the list. It is not current.
No, it is current for all the groups that are active, and it has all the old information still on there, so that people can still do mailings to them, which applicants do, because some have become dormant, which is different than being not active. And if something's on their block, we've seen people jump back and come back to discuss things. So it's a little more nuanced, but you know, that's,
How can we encourage all of the block associations to share this information with their entire block or blocks, depending, rather than, because I mean, what I've noticed is it's always like the same 4 people that come.
yeah, they usually email everybody on their committees, I mean, who are on their mailing lists, and they're the people who come because people expect them to represent them.
And nobody else wants to come.
Yeah.
I mean, you usually tend to get the same people. The people that are active are the people that are active. So it ends up being the same people. And even with the block associations, again, because we don't get the applications till a week beforehand, then you're asking them to be sending out to their mailing list to let people know. You know, and everybody's a volunteer and everybody's busy. So what tends to happen, I find what tends to happen, if there's a high profile place, people really get the word out. For every little place, they don't. It's overwhelming for everybody with their lives going on.
Pete Davies has a question. What has happened to the regulation recently passed that required an applicant to post notice of an SLA hearing on the front of the premises? Anyone?
Yeah, that has come up, or that came up. Carter, you can remember, I think a year or two ago. They didn't notify us as to this, but this is something that they have done by putting it on the front of their establishment. But generally speaking, that's after the 30-day notice.
It's not good.
So not really helpful.
It's actually much after the 30-day notice. It's usually, when they're about to be heard at the State Liquor Authority. I have not seen it in advance of it being heard by Community Board 2.
Okay.
And I would say,
that? I'm sorry, who would enforce that or go about regulating that?
You understand the State Liquor Authority has their own rules. They require people to publish in newspapers that nobody reads. And that's, to them, that's notice, okay? What I said before is that the 30-day notice is something that they're required to give to the community board. The community board's not required to give anybody any notice. And many years ago, there was no notice given to anybody. It wasn't until Bob came around that we actually, in Carter, that's even before my time, Carter can correct me, but that's when things started getting posted. And that's not required. So,
Posting's been done for a long time because that was the only way when we were mailing things out. The postings of meetings goes back for a long time. But what we've seen is an increase, a pretty significant increase in the amount of liquor licenses. And we also used to not hear beer and wine applications.
Yeah, and also the posting itself says nothing. All it says is that there's going to be an on-premise license here, and that's it. That goes back to what I was saying, is it's the type of posting that matters. It's not the posting itself necessarily.
Okay. Donna?
well, I was just going to say that also posting in a window of a spot, unless you're walking by and looking at the spot, it wouldn't do a whole heck of a lot of good anyway, really, unless they were doing construction, let's say, and you were walking by and that drew your attention. But how often do any of us just look in the window of a spot just for that information? So I think to Bob's point, Bob Gormley going around and posting all these signs on the lampposts and things is one of the best ways I've found for myself to find out what's going on in any of the areas, and it's really helpful.
Okay. All right. Well, that is it for liquor licensing. Missing.
Does anybody in our committee have a question?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Our working group, anyone?
Well, one thing I want to say about the process is that I'm on SLA 1, and that it's really geared for the big restaurants. And, that is the problem, is that they have big lawyers, they have experienced lawyers. We see one lawyer over and over, they know how to make their way through. But the other aspect of the SLA applications is that you can see that it is an entry point for many people who are immigrants or first-time business owners, because they can do it on their own if they get a little space, but they are the ones most overwhelmed by the process. And we spend a lot of time at the meetings trying to help them. We tell them to come back, we tell them to bring someone with them, but that's the problem, is that there isn't a way that the city isn't helping them, and we do the best we can, but it's very hard. And I do agree, and I don't know what the answer is, but we see it over and over. And that is a problem. Some the notifications like Zella NoHo, she posts every SLA application. She's great for her neighborhood. I think it varies all over the community board. You're right. Like some block associations are terrific and they post it, others don't. And that's why we need Bob's localized posting, because we can't be sure in every neighborhood people are going to be notified, even know about it.
And I would say this, Susan, just to reflect what you were saying, is that oftentimes people do have lawyers, or they have expediters who are not lawyers, who do the paperwork and submit the questionnaires and things of that sort, submit the 30-day notice, but they do not show up at the meeting because they don't want to pay for the lawyer, or they don't want to pay for the representative. So that happens often. So a lot of times you'll see people show up and they are actually represented by a lawyer, and they would be represented by a lawyer up at the State Liquor Authority. And so, that's where, most people have a lawyer, some have expediters, but most have lawyers because of the process up at the State Liquor Authority. and less so at the community board level. But, you know, you'd be surprised at how many people actually do have lawyers that don't have the lawyers show up at our SLA meetings.
And just to Bob's point, you know, that's a not, that's, if you look carefully at the questionnaires when they come in, Susan, you'll see that
Yes.
there's supplied by an attorney, but the attorney has either chosen not to come with their client or told their client that they won't come. And we also have some representatives who are not attorneys who don't always do the best by their clients. I think the perspective of many committee members, if you were to go back and review the applications and the way that they were presented to us. And it creates a perception of a little confusion there when in fact, sometimes they might've been better off on their own without their expediter, because the expediter has confused the situation more. Or is not direct. So there's a lot of different undercurrents that are there on a pretty regular basis that create a perception that's maybe different if you're just watching than what's going on under the surface, I think.
Betty, do you have a question, Betty?
Yeah, going back to what Susan was talking about, and I think obviously Carter and Bob touched on it a little bit too, are the individuals who have a lot of difficulty at the community board level, for example, if we were to establish processes that made it easier for first-time business owners or immigrants to get through the community board process, would they face the same roadblocks once they got to the state liquor authority? I guess I'm just trying to gauge how much, once they get through the community board process, would that approval, how far would that get them at the state liquor authority if they were not fully equipped to go through the community board process without extra help? Is there a way to facilitate that process as well, not just the one from the community board?
Yeah, it is much more complex at the state liquor authority for a reason. I mean, there's regulations in place, you know, whether they're looked at as a way to prevent people from, or a bar to entry, or is it necessary because you're licensing, you know, the liquor, which can have significant impacts. So, so to the extent that the state liquor authority has regulations, we're just a very small part of the equation. The community board gives a recommendation because it's almost like a quasi mediation. You're bringing people together to try to bridge a gap so you can have stipulations, and you can have a defined method of operation so that everybody knows, you know, how it's supposed to be, and people can communicate on terms. So it is a form of mediation, but we just provide a recommendation. There's all sorts of things that take place at the state liquor authority in terms of, you know, you have to pay a fee, you have to provide application. There are all sorts of background checks that go into issuing a liquor license. So, you know, much more complex at the liquor authority than at the community board level. I hope I answered the question. Sorry if I didn't.
No, yes, thank you.
Amy?
Yeah, does anyone know if New York City Department of Small Business Services offers this kind of support for people applying for liquor licenses? Because it seems to me that's a good fit. I did some consulting work for them when I consulted, and I also went through their MWBE process, which at the time was paper, and it was a huge notebook, and they had amazing people who walked you through every step. But I'm wondering if that's a place for small businesses that are applying for a liquor license to get, if they had somebody working there who they did this and helped them through this licensing process, that might be a way. I don't know how we recommend that or anything like that, or we look into it, but that could be a place where that could live for small businesses. They're multi-language, so it's one thing to think about. They're very helpful.
Thank you. You said, what was the name of it again? American Business?
No, it's Small Business Services. So it's a New York City government department, SPS.
Oh, okay.
And Greg, somebody or other, I forget his last name. He was my client, runs it.
Okay.
I can email him and ask him if this is something the committee wants to follow up on.
Okay. But again, I mean, everybody's a volunteer again, and that's like one more ask that we're asking someone else to do.
I'm just pointing it out. It's something that in a resolution, if you want it, you could say it's their way of small SBS or something like that too.
Okay, thanks, Amy.
Well, could I ask a question? I mean,
Yeah,
that's
sure,
a
go ahead,
question, but
Katie.
yeah, I mean, I think there were two sides to the issue. One is, well, maybe it's three sides. There's the focus on the potential, the applicant, and is the process equitable? And we recently had a situation which really, which we addressed in an equity way, but I don't think it came from an equity basis. But we wanted to provide translation services to someone who was applying, and we wanted to make sure that that language was no barrier. So that was I think a good a good example of how we could be more equitable to clients, to the applicant. And then we have we've talked a little bit about equity in terms of the potential customers, and when this whole thing about private parties and perhaps excluding people on an inequitable basis. So that's another area of equity. And then we've also talked about equity in terms of informing the community or making sure that the community is informed. So I see three tranches, and we may see this in all the committees, three tranches of, or three groups that we're trying to balance in terms of the of access and fairness. So I'm just articulating that because I see that coming out of this conversation very clearly.
Thank you, Katie. So I don't see any other questions or any other comments. I guess we'll then move on to our next committee. Mar?
Susanna is not with us yet. Shirley is actually not going to join us.
Okay.
So we can talk about what we discussed with her yesterday. So traffic and transportation. They deal with, the committee itself addresses the design, planning, operation, and regulation of streets, neighborhood plazas, bridges, tunnels. I'm sorry, quit. Tunnels and other transportation options, including pedestrian, motor vehicle, and bicycle traffic, street safety, and street activity. Major topics include traffic calming, parking, signage, signalization, bicycle lanes, street amenities, and upgrading transit routes, stations, and stops. What we realized with traffic and transportation was that it is in its essence an equity issue, because we all deal with traffic and transportation. We are all walking down these streets. We are all pedestrians. We are all drivers. We all take the buses and the subways and other modes of public transportation that our city offers. It is one thing that is truly for everybody. And in thinking about that, we thought about ways it could better meet the needs of our diverse community. One of those things was benches. I said to Shirley, you know, there are a lot of elderly people in my building, and almost all of them use the 14th Street bus and catch it just at Abingdon Square. And as far as I can remember, there has never been anywhere to sit there. And I often see our older adults in our neighborhood standing and waiting for that bus for a very long time. There's also not a bus clock, so you really can't tell when the bus is coming. It would be better if we had those things throughout the neighborhood. Another thing we talked about was language. And I just did it myself. I just said, and the elderly. My building, you know, has many elderly, but really a better term might be older adults. And I believe that it is preferred. It is at least according to AARP. Another term was the disabled, was another term that came up. And we talked about leading with the word people. Whenever we talk about people and all the differences we as people have, we want to say people with disabilities, right? Instead of the disabled. And that, you know, across the board, I think honors our individuality and respect of each other. Shirley?
Yeah, I think though it's actually differently abled is the correct term. Differently abled.
Well,
Thank you.
yes, differently abled.
And you're talking about, definitely you're talking about disability.
You're talking about people with disabilities, though.
Of course, that's what you started talking about. That's exactly what we're talking about. Yeah.
We should
Semantics, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we should, I mean, we should further investigate that. And I think when referring to people or groups of people, we should definitely respect the terms that they prefer and those terms that respect them as people and as individuals and as human beings. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes. Shirley also mentioned that traffic and transportation truly is one of the more equitable committees that addresses everybody's needs, young, old, because everybody needs transportation in some form.
Yes.
Buses included, transit. She was talking about that we probably need to advocate for more bus routes that we're taking away for some people in our communities as well. I'm trying to think of what else she had mentioned yesterday. The chair, she said something about that there are no more bus sheds anymore. They've been all taken away for a lot of people in our area. And there's no, we need more of that. That's all been taken away. There are no more seating areas for people.
And we talked about the Department of Transportation program that actually anybody can apply to request seating and benches in the city. And people don't really know that, but there are places that it really, really would be helpful. And so we talked about ways maybe getting that word out and making that information better available to the community.
I just dropped it in the chat. It's a city bench program, if you want to read more about that.
So yes, and the frequency of the bus routes as well.
I happen to be listening on the conversation, and she also mentioned about subways and getting access to subways, and that they've been promoting that as a big deal because obviously a lot of people can't get to the subway if you can't go up and down stairs. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Right, yeah. And she said that the 14th Street busway, and the L train renovation and revitalization, that there was some elevator that was just recently put in, which they've been advocating for so long, the bureaucracy of the government in just getting anything done with all the resolutions that she's been writing on traffic and transportation for years, that it takes a while for anything to be seen or get done, especially, I even brought up that corner of Varick and Clarkson Street, where someone was killed. I don't know how long ago, but it was before I came to the community. I want to say like 10 years prior. And I remember coming before the committee, Traffic and Transportation, to talk about how dangerous that corner is just across at Clarkson and Varick. And it was just over the summer that they finally did something about that particular area. We addressed like all those issues yesterday.
Very good. Shirley?
Yeah, you guys have done a very good job. I think I know everyone's busy, but maybe I think for just the chairs, I guess everybody couldn't be, if chairs aren't available, maybe they should have at least a representative just for the back and forth. I mean, I know you probably took notes of what she said when you asked questions, but just a thought, you know what I'm saying? Because just because there's a chair, there are other people on the committee who might also have time that could also answer some of these or talk more in depth about what the committee does or some of the issues that probably Shirley is one person, she's the chair, but it could be someone with the other different kinds of suggestions. So that was just a suggestion. As it relates to and I take public transportation, as it relates to those benches and then those coverings they have, what has happened because of our homeless crisis in our neighborhood is that when you really go, and I like sitting down, but in most instances, all the people in those seats there are homeless people. They've kind of taken up that space. And I was told when I was asking about that to someone, they said that's why the city is taking them down, because their homeless people actually use them for sitting. And then it does not allow the regular people who are taking the transportation to have a place to sit.
That's interesting. Okay. Katie?
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to say something. As someone who has a disability, I think in some ways traffic and transportation is the most, it does the most to address issues, because mobility it's all about mobility, and a lot of people with disabilities have a mobility problem. So traffic and transportation is very important when we're thinking about this form of equity and wanting to address it in our community. And I think Dr. Smith will certainly be very sympathetic about this. I mean, this is something that Tom spoke about all the time.
Yes.
The fact,
yes, right.
The bus routes, the bus frequency, the placement of bus stops, the need to have places to sit down. So this is something that we've had a very strong voice about, and it's good to be reminded that we've been jumping up and down, but it takes a long time to get these things through the bureaucracy. So it's just balancing all the things that happen.
Yeah.
One more thing to balance and to remember.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Katie, because that's very true for Tom. He always advocated for it.
Yes.
I wanted to speak to what you guys are talking about with benches. We've got a long history with the bench issues in our community board, and it seems that it's cycled through time of we like benches, then we don't like benches. And and it's because what Shirley was just pointing out, that it's a magnet sometimes for homeless encampments or issues. And it's interesting because then when you talk to people who really need to sit down when they're walking around, or really need to be able to take a break. If they're walking, you see why it's important. But then, you know, now we have some changes going on locally with the pandemic and with the economy, obviously. And so we've got other things going on. And as we go forward in the next few years with budget cuts from city services, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But the tension with benches seems to have been, you know, ongoing for a long time. And it's interesting. I just sort of encourage everybody to talk to your friends who are a little older about where they can sit if they're walking around. And I think the perspective changes pretty rapidly, you know, when you have that in mind. It's interesting to hear about the bus shelters though, and the seating for buses. That's exactly the place you'd want to have seating, right? For people. And at the same time, you know, I think Dr. Smith brought up the flip side issues, you know, that why people don't like them. So it's not an easy one.
It's not an easy one. Well, does anybody else have any?
I was wondering if I could add a comment in there. This is Akila.
Hello,
Conversation, great. Hi. I would love to maybe put together a document kind of looking at identifying places in the community where we can have more assistance, public, you know, whether it's benches or other kinds of assistive structures, where we think we might need them for our community and for the people who live here, because it's so important to be able to navigate the physical world, to be a part of the community, even just to be a part of the community board. And I think it's such an integral and important part of life downtown, especially it being like this pre-colonial architectural sort of area with a lot of older structures. It would be really important to like think through, you know, areas that may need more work, more put in so that everyone can really enjoy them. I don't know if that's something that
I think it's a great idea. I think that
to think about.
We should get together with traffic and transportation and think about ways to do that.
So Keila, so benches, right? What are some of the other things just that you're thinking of off the top of your head?
I mean, you know, there is, I don't know. I mean, there are things that can be put into playgrounds, for example, for kids who have disabilities, like, you know, assistance to like ramps to go up the slides and come down slides. I think a lot of our playgrounds also do not have accessibility for differently abled children. And it's someplace that, you know, I go to every single day as a parent, but notice that it doesn't seem to be a place where children who are differently able to occupy those spaces. And I would like to see more inclusion in playgrounds and things like that.
Yeah, you know, that's one of the things in the past is that we've used some of graduate students to do some of that work. And we went and we surveyed the whole community board for curb cuts at the intersections quite some time ago. And I think that things like that can really make a big difference because people aren't actually actively seeking out things. So that sounds like it could be a pretty good project that, you know, is sort of timeless in that when we have an opportunity to work with a graduate student at NYU or something along those lines, that we could really move forward with that in a good way. So like hearing a little bit more about the ideas, we could definitely reach out to Bob Gormley and think about putting something together to do that.
That would be great.
Yeah. And I think the bus stops too, that doing a survey of all of those or other areas with seating, that's an interesting idea too. Because with all the capabilities of mapping now, it's not hard once, I'm sure we can get that data and have a better understanding of it.
That's true.
That sounds great. I think that would be awesome. Moving on to the next committee. So still no Suzanne or Valerie.
I know.
I think we're gonna have to go without them. I guess it's just 6:30 now. Let's go with Valerie. I don't think that she's gonna make it. Her flight was delayed.
Right.
So, the reopening working group, Chair Valerie DeRosa. Purpose of the working group is to address the needs of the community as it reopens during the COVID-19 pandemic. That is a tall order, right? A lot to be done. And if anybody here is on the reopening working group,
I can add to this.
nope. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
No, I'm on, it's Donna. I'm on the reopening working group, so I'm just on my phone.
do you want to tell us a little about the work you guys are doing?
So what was that Valerie went through? So we've been doing the work with the reopening of, well, we all know the restaurants, both the open streets restaurants and just the restaurants reopening and the seating around that. We did a meeting on the universities. We did a follow-up meeting on the reopening with the idea of it being made permanent and extending it through till next year. What else did you have down on there?
Tourism. You guys
Excuse
did
me?
you guys did a meeting on tourism, a meeting on the museums, the reopening
With
of
the hotels and the museums. Yep, that's right.
But primarily,
that was good.
Your work has been pretty much dominated by the open streets for restaurants. Am I right?
I think it's been sort of dominated by that, but I believe we've been also, we have been having the universities and the museums and everything come in. They were later to reopen, so it was interesting to hear what they were going through and how it was good for them to be able to get people back. We haven't done storefronts because of the extension of our last meeting about opening the restaurants longer, and so I believe that was going to be one of the follow-ups that we were going to do to see if that's working for anybody. From what I've seen and heard, there aren't many storefronts that are taking advantage of that, but that, just opened now that it's cold out. So
yeah, we discussed that with Valerie for the stores, and she just said, so many are just not participating. And one operator came and, said that her shop had been successful in the past because she was able to create, beautiful window displays that people could see from the street. And it really, really brought customers in. And now there's the open streets or the restaurant have completely blocked view.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that to you yesterday. Yeah, it's an interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting problem for everybody, and everybody now is trying to grab what street space and sidewalk space they can, and people that live in the area or visit the area are still trying to be able to walk down those sidewalks with everybody there. So it's an interesting dilemma, and for the restaurants and the stores, people are trying to get by. I mean, the situation for them is quite dire. So without any government help, really, everybody's trying to do what they can and get along, and it's a process. And the enforcement, the lack of clear regulations, things being under DOT and FDNY and I forget the other one. So it's just, guidance for anybody is not easy to find, and who's going to enforce is also not easy to figure out and to get done. So that's a lot of what the conversation is about, and it changes, as we all know, often.
Right.
Yeah.
In this month, they're going to be meeting and talking about the enforcement of open restaurants in particular. And, we're going to have a real equity issue there as far as businesses as this plays out. And I don't know if people are quite as aware, because the city has not been enforcing the rules, people have just gone ahead and put up a lot of structures or pleading ignorance of the rules. And the structures are non-compliant, or people have built structures in front of adjoining buildings without permission. There's all kinds of issues. And when it comes back to doing actual enforcement, the repercussions are going to come down on a lot of businesses that were just taking action to survive, and from their perspective. And it's not going to be perceived as being fair. And, how we, if there's any advice that we can provide to everybody about just how do you get back in to place where everybody is playing by the same rules. And, and that's a big issue with residents, with businesses, with the employees, of businesses, as their employers, start to build out things outside, how they're using the inside. There's so many different issues, but it has dramatic impacts. And I think that, many of the workers in the establishments are, certainly people who we're talking about, as far as equity issues, particularly as it comes to racial equity. And their job is dependent on illegal structures sometimes, and at this point. So we really have a big issue on our hand as we sort through this. And, I don't know if there's a right answer, but it's a huge issue, and resolving it is not really going to be pleasant, because a lot of businesses, for whatever reason, have built all these elaborate structures. People are relying on them for work. Customers, as we know, want to go and dine in them, some people. So it's very complicated, but that's our next thorny mess that we're going to have to navigate through, I guess. And it's not easy. I'll leave it at that. And I know it's an issue that a lot of people don't want to deal with because of those very issues.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's going to be an interesting meeting, because the neighbors are going to come out. They don't want the open streets, but the operators need to operate. It's another issue that affects all of us, in different ways, and also not easy. Another thing Valerie brought up.
Excuse me, before you leave, I like to respond to ask Carter a question about what he just said. Is that
Dr. Smith? Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Carter, I am happy to hear about enforcement. In this meeting, you'll notify us as to when it's going to be. But I guess for me, what comes to mind is, who's going to be doing the enforcements, or is that going to be part of the meeting?
Well, I think that's the question.
That's a very big issue. Who's going to be doing it? I hope they don't give it to the police. The police has a lot to do already, but.
Well, I think that the enforcement, the agency that's running it is DOT. And,
okay.
I can just tell you from our interactions, it's very disconcerting, and you can understand why operators are having so much trouble, because they're not really addressing enforcement or saying, yeah, that's fine, don't worry about it.
My dog's not on the leash, so
Um,
he's very friendly, but
yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's most of this stuff is not would not be under the NYPD's jurisdiction, I don't think, Shirley, for most of this stuff, except perhaps as they might relate to noise or sort of in the moment things, if they're serving after hours or operating beyond their hours and stuff like that. But most of the complaints that people have, I think, would be other agencies. Problem is nobody's doing it. And the meeting is on.
That I know, because I see it all the time right here. People set up their tables in front of not only their business, but the business to the left of them, to the business to the right of them. They set up their tables right in the middle of the sidewalk, and you can't pass. So I'm very happy to hear that they are going to be doing
the meeting is next Monday at 6:30.
Perfect. Okay.
Can I just interject? So many of the structures that are now being built in the village, at least that I see, can be worse than the existing restaurant. They're completely enclosed. They don't allow for airflow. So if people are going to think they're safer in the winter sitting in an enclosed plastic thing with a bunch of other people, I don't know how wise it is, and I don't know how the city is sort of setting out even guidelines for these structures so that there is enough airflow and safety. It seems, each restaurant is on their own to decide what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, Sandy, that's a great point. I mean, we've been told on more of these closed meetings, or not closed, but other meetings that I've been on, that those structures have to abide by the indoor dining rules if they have more than two sides that are covered. But there hasn't really been clarity on what that actually is. And I haven't gone back and checked. Maybe they've have given more specifics as to what occupancy they can have, but it's supposed to be the same as inside, so there can only be 25% occupancy. And I think because the outside structures obviously don't have certificates of occupancy, that they have to go by the architectural rules of person per square foot. And I don't know what those actual details are and whether they posted them anywhere. But if it's covered on more than two sides, they need to follow the inside protocol, not the 6 feet apart, the table 6 feet apart protocol. So.
Is anybody doing that?
I mean, that's the question. And that's the frustration. And that's why this is going to be an issue, because you have businesses that live in the moment of each weekend. That's when they're making money.
Right.
And they have to make, their decisions based on that. And they see what other people are doing. And then you don't have any enforcement. So then you follow what your neighbor's been doing. And, creates a huge issue. And getting it out of that mess is a big problem. But we've also been informed that any structure that's on a sidewalk, not in the roadbed, is also not legal. Now, somebody has contested that, but I, said that's not true, but we've heard that from DOT that's actually the case. And
there's lots of them in the village.
Oh yeah, and people have spent a lot of money building them. And so, and that's where people are working too. Right. In there, it's not just, so it's a complicated issue.
For sure.
I see people have their hands raised, but I did want to say, a few months ago, when the takeaway liquor began, there were some instances of uneven enforcement, right? So they were loosely, I guess, trying to enforce this new thing, but you know, Patricia had a friend in the neighborhood who had a place, and for some weird reason, the cops kept showing up to his restaurant, and he was doing the exact same thing as the guy next door. But the guy next door, the cops were just walking by, even though people were blatantly, you know, shirking all the rules. That's a concern, and that is definitely an equity issue. How do
I'm surprised to hear that, because I heard the police weren't doing anything and only got involved in, at least with the 6th precinct, I don't know about the other precincts, they only got involved in one establishment in particular because it was so egregious, and they weren't listening to the police department's requests, which was to at least wrap it up at least a half hour after they were supposed to close, and they weren't. So
this is not that place. This is like a kind of
I know you know the place I'm talking about. I'm just saying I hadn't heard of them going anywhere else in other precincts. So that's definitely interesting.
Mar, was there a difference in the what were the differences in the owners? Were they all of the same ethnicity or what?
No,
well, then you need to let's not skirt around it. I think you need to say.
Patricia, do you want to tell?
One was an Italian restaurant, and the other was a Latino like not tapas, but Mexican cooking. And the one that was getting harassed mostly by the police was the Mexican cuisine restaurant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's let me just see those. We should not skirt around. We should say what it was. I mean, I had to ask that question. I figured it had to be definitely a difference in ethnicity.
And the other thing is when we start discussing these, also a lot of this is complaint driven for the police department. I mean, sorry, but I don't think they've shown up to do anything on their own in any of our 4 precincts in a few months, and just proactively. But it'd be interesting, I think, Patricia, in that particular case, and Mar, we should go back and look at the 311 complaints for the address and have a better understanding, you know, if that's originating with the neighbors as well, you know, and in that, because it's in to discuss it, even talk to the community affairs officers at the precinct about it. Because, you know, if that's something, you know, that's happening without it being complaint driven, we should definitely, you know, ask some questions.
I agree, Carter. I agree wholeheartedly.
You know, I have found though, you know, that a lot of this stuff is complaint driven, which is, you know, but even then, I'm sure most people here have heard that, you know, I'd be curious if there are 311 complaints made against 2 places, they're not going to the other place, and the other place is just having those complaints closed out. That's the other thing that I'd like to know about too, because one of the big concerns right now from local residents is that the police are just closing out complaints without visiting the sites, particularly for open dining complaints and noise complaints. And so if they're selectively visiting a place, but yet closing out other complaints, which we can kind of see in some of the data, I'd be very interested to hear about that as well, because it's definitely.
Darlene in the chat said that 5 311 complaints on the same premise will generate action. I didn't realize that, but good to know. Lois, do you have a question?
Hi, thank you. Lois Rakoff?
Yes.
Yeah? Oh, hi. Just mentioning 2 things. What Sandy was saying. I've noticed that, and what Carter was mentioning, that I call them the little houses, that they have doors, fiberglass or whether it's heavy plastic, closed doors and heating inside. Some have heating inside, and I just don't understand that how they even circulate the air. And the other point that I wanted to make, that there is there's a jealousy of a group, or I don't know if they're a group, but they will rat. Some managers or owners rat on other establishments that are not conforming to the standards. I don't know if there's any follow-up on it, but I've been told through a few of my neighbors that that's what's going on, because there's this major jealousy that some have not been chastised or cited by any of the inspectors, and others that have minimal problems get cited. So I just wanted to bring that to the group's attention.
Donna, do you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, I just had one comment, that when we're talking about equity, I think it's important that we remember also the equity of the workers that are there, that are masked, that are working all day, going inside these little enclosures, or working, just inside, even when they're working outside, serving people that are unmasked. And I read somewhere something about a workers' bills of rights for people that go to eat out, and if you're sitting there for 2 hours, to put your mask on when the server comes over, and to show them that respect as well. So I just think, they're out there working all day around unmasked people for hours on end, and something to just keep in mind.
Yes, that was one of the things that Valerie brought up. If you see here, how can this committee's work further social justice? She said, there's always more to do. There's several hidden voices in our community, such as service workers who travel into our community every single day to ensure our district is vibrant. And that is very true. I wanted to speak to what Lois was saying about restaurants actually calling 311 on their neighbors. And, I don't know what happened in the case of this Mexican restaurant that I was just talking about, because I got the story secondhand. But, it's not that unlikely that, a restaurant next door might want, in a high traffic area, might want less competition. I mean, that could happen. And we know of another instance where that happened. And also, these places have the ability to organize. I mean, this goes back to notice, and people who are savvy, people who are active in these licenses and these meetings and these applications, they know what they're doing. So if there's a venue that the neighbors like and a venue that they don't like for whatever reason, they're going to be more likely to call 311, even if that place is not breaking the rules, or breaking the rules just like everybody else.
Yes, you're correct, Mar. And if it's not, I'm sorry for interrupting. It's my topic. It's Lois again. And if it's not the manager or the owner, it'll be a friend of the person, so that that email is not directly traced to that particular manager or owner of the restaurant. So you're correct, and that's a very unfair and unrealistic thing, but that's what's happening. It's almost like cat eat cat or something like that, where you have to get by, and you'll do what you can to get by. So thank you, Mara. It's very true.
It is. Yes, we've seen it. Does anybody else have any comments on the reopening working group?
I just wanted to jump in and say, on the point with the hidden voices, it's something I've talked to Valerie about a bit, and she had some ideas. And it's, if anybody has any thoughts on how we might talk about the workers, you know, at some point. We've got our plate full. Let us know, because we've wanted to do it, but we felt that it wouldn't be right, or I did at least, have people sort of be disguised if they were talking about working in a place, because these, you know, this is their employment. Or if, you know, if there's some other way we could do this, we could do that. I think we would like to, but it's hard to do it because you're putting people out front, you know, in potentially having some backlash, because as you've seen from articles, the customers aren't always that great to the employees at places. If anybody has any thoughts on that, though, let Valerie know, or I know, or both of us. It would be very helpful.
I'd like to add to that a thought that I had, Carter, and you guys have probably already thought about it. But maybe we, like CB2 could have like a marketing campaign around, you know, keeping our workers safe, or some kind of, I don't know, some kind of marketing campaign. I don't know what that would look like in a community kind of level, but where we come up with some positive, grateful, and like, you know, positively influencing our neighbors to look out for the welfare of all the workers in our community.
And I suggest that these workers all have employers. I mean, presumably, I mean, I've gone into restaurants and it's the employers who tell me how to keep my mask on to protect their workers. I think if anything, we might want to be getting in, if we feel that there's an issue, we should be getting in touch maybe with employers.
Yes, I mean, yes, these employers that received so much PPP based on paying these employees. So yeah, I think that might be something we could do. Could we do that?
Well, I guess there also has to be a question of like, what sort of data do we have? Like, do we have data that shows that, you know, employers are mistreating their employees?
Well, I don't even know I think what I was hearing from Akila is just sort of a punch list of things that you can do as a customer that's better for the people working in establishment. Sort of like what Donna was saying, wear your mask when your server comes over to your table. You know, just little basic things like that, or, you know, not making it uncomfortable. You know, when right now, if somebody walks inside without a mask on, I mean, come on, that's like, we're a little past that phase where that's excusable. But it's just a reminder that people need to be cautious. They may not see themselves at a risk, but, you know, for whatever reason, but it's a huge risk to people going to work.
Can we publish that? Could we publish that on the website?
Yeah, we could certainly do something and just put it out, you know, with our mailings. But I think that's a good idea, Akila, and we should. Unfortunately, Valerie isn't with us tonight, but I think that's something we should talk to her about, because I think she'd be excited to do that.
I was thinking of something we can even give to all the restaurants to put on all their tables. It's like CB2, and it's like a positive saying about positive behaviors, you know, to protect the workers in all the restaurants. You know how all the restaurants now, they have QR codes and they have little things on every table. Like CB2 could have a thing on the tables that's about promoting, you know, positive, safe keeping behaviors for our workers.
I think it's wishful thinking that the restaurants would put something from us on their tables, but
maybe not.
But I think just starting that is a good. You got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah. I think starting it, and then the word might get out to the restaurants. You know, they want to keep, I mean, for the most part, I'd like to think that they would like to keep their employees safe as well, and also don't want to cause an issue with the customers. So just raising awareness, however we can do it in a positive manner. A lot of people might not give it a second thought, but if they just start, it's like everything else, just change the conversation a little bit and get people to have a little more awareness of the people that are serving them when they're in the place.
All right.
And it's also different if the message comes from like the community versus the restaurant. You know, when restaurants say this is our policy, you know, people hear that and they immediately start to react in a negative way. But if it's like, hey, the community is asking you to do this to keep our workers safe, that could land differently in a more positive way too. Just as a
Right. Any more comments or questions regarding reopening working group? No, they're having their meeting again, Carter, you said on Monday, this coming Monday?
Yeah, a week from today at 6:30.
Okay, all right. Our last and final committee that we'll be discussing this evening is social services, and the chair is Susanna Aaron. I see that she's on, but
I'm on here.
Oh, hi. Okay.
Hi.
I was just gonna say the purpose of your that you fill out. You said to highlight and discuss social services and health needs of our community that will assist the community board's recommendation for the year-end district needs statement and list of budget priority requests. And you said the purview is social services and health. And I would just like for you to give us like a synopsis of what your committee does for everyone.
Yeah, our committee is a little bit challenged for two reasons. One, we are not an agency-driven committee, unlike SLA or land use. We are, you know, whatever we want to talk about. And the challenge in our district is that we are a neighborhood whose social services compared to the rest of the city, whose social needs are lower. But wait, there's a caveat. So if you look on our community district profile, we are, you know, mostly white. We are higher income, higher education, higher health outcomes. Everything is we're one of the most, you know, affluent neighborhoods in the city. That said, we know, although we don't have a huge amount of data, that this is a neighborhood that wasn't always affluent. It's not Fifth Avenue. And we know that there are pockets of people in our district that don't fit the profile. So the clearest example for us is the seniors, because seniors, a lot of them have been here for a long, long time, from when this neighborhood was not a low income, but an economical neighborhood, right? So I think that the Social Services Committee is a perfect place to examine questions about equity and fairness. And I feel like we're always challenged about how to do that, how to get at that. So for example, we had a question on food insecurity. Oh, I see that you said that there. Right, our community board, did you guys write this about from our?
Yeah, you filled out our
okay.
So
a long time ago.
It was a while ago. So, but we'd love to hear
everything I was going to say. Okay, yeah. So, our representative, right? So, for example, right, I have said this: Chinatown is poorly represented in our on our community board, and the social needs of Chinatown are very different than the social needs of Greenwich Village and Soho. And I think that one thing we could do as a board would be to have better representation from Chinatown. It's just a little sliver of our community district. But for example, there was a question, you know, about food insecurity this summer. And I spoke to Margaret Chin's office, and yeah, there's a lot of food insecurity in Chinatown. I was going to deal with it in our committee, but when I spoke to Chin's office, and they were like, you know, we're so on it that I don't even know what to tell you what to do. We know what that deal is, and there's nothing that we really need from you. Then the other question, okay, a better understanding about the policing experience. This is not really our purview. At one point, our committee did have public safety under its awning, but we don't have that anymore. So this question about policing is not really directly part of our community's scope. I do think that everything I said here is true, which is we should have a better experience about the policing experience for everyone in our community, because we have a lot of visitors. So both for residents and visitors. and that we should know more about the police's experience. I'm a believer in having a close relationship with our precinct. I think we rely on them a lot. I think we've known a lot of really good people in that precinct. And I think that we should have closer, continued dialogue and good relationships with them. So let me just see here. Who are her applications? 2 committees. So I'm not sure what else to say. What I really feel is that I welcome from anyone on this board suggestions of areas that we should cover that are relevant to our district. So there was a period when I was on this committee and someone was really interested in Veterans Affairs. Well, we had a meeting on Veterans Affairs, but like, why are we having a meeting on, is no data about how big an issue that is or isn't in our district. There are a lot of issues that are citywide very important. And the difficulty is that they're really not part of our district. So I'm excited about the fact, frankly, that we're gonna, as a social services committee chair, I'm excited that we're gonna have 2 shelters, one opening soon and one opening in a couple of years. And that offers a lot of opportunities for us to create bridges that I think where we can become more active as an organization to creating opportunities for diversity and engagement on that level. Otherwise, the issues that we tend to deal with, we talk to the DOOR, which is a population that doesn't reside in our district, but obviously the DOOR is a very important organization for youth. And for LGBT youth as well. We talked to Greenwich House because they have issues with seniors, and seniors are an important part of the social service needs of our district. We've talked about the homeless with the Department of Homeless Services, and we've talked about tenant issues with mobilization for justice. And we are always interested in broadening our circle of people that we talk to. Like, so for example, I've reached out to Hedrick Martin, which is a school that has, it's an LGBT school, and I feel they have a new executive director, and I would love to meet him and know what kind of contracts they have with the city for social service issues. Okay. But we would love to hear, I'm always interested in suggestions about how we can be more effective, proactive, what populations we're not knowing. I was looking up SNAP recipients recently, food stamp recipients. There are food stamp recipients in our district. There are about 1,000 of them, which is like 1% of our district. So, it's hard to know, like, is that something that, I'm not sure what the issues, it was an issue, I'm sorry. There was a question about online providers, retailers not accepting SNAP. And I wondered, maybe that's something that we should be dealing with in our district. People who are relying on, whatever it is for food to be delivered, and places that don't accept SNAP, except that we have a tiny percentage of people in our district who get food stamps. And we are a district with 150,000 supermarkets and food stores. So we're not one of those, we're not a food desert, like the Bronx, where it's a huge issue. And so
but there's still hungry people here.
I'm sorry?
There are still hungry people here. I mean, I think of it, you said a few times in your questionnaire, like, we just don't have these issues, right? Because people here tend to be affluent. But the thing is, no community member left behind. Even if there's one hungry person, shouldn't we be able to provide them information and resources to be able to get what they need? I mean, I know there are only there are only 1,000 people in all of Community Board 2 that receive food stamps. Is that
so my feeling is, I think that I see our role as being advocates for, advocates to the city for people who the city might not be aware of, right? So the idea is that we serve as a bridge between the needs of this district and the city, which doesn't spend a lot of time, hanging out around Washington Square Park. So yes, there are people who are hungry in this district. But the question of whether advocating for more online retailers to accept SNAP, I just don't think is an issue in this district, because we have a supermarket on every corner. I think that that is an issue in places where there are food deserts, where there's only a bodega at the end of the street.
You know, Suzanne, I'd be curious if our supermarkets, the ones that we have, because a lot of the recipients of SNAP may be elderly and may not be wanting to go to the stores. If we did a quick just survey of, we've got what, 4 or 5, you know, that may do delivery of the supermarkets.
What they take SNAP?
Yeah, and whether or not they take SNAP. Because that's actually something that would be, I'd be curious if there are any of the chains that are doing line delivery if they don't accept SNAP.
Right. I think that, because I think that the issue, I think that's a really good question and we can look into that. I was speaking specifically about this one issue, which was online, you know, retailers, and I can't.
And I think to Mara's point though, is that we need, you know, if we can, we should be trying to look for the recipients though. That's the larger question,
that's a good
right?
idea.
I mean, and the other thing is do we have anybody, because all, you know, the food bank lines from what we've heard have increased. Is there any confusion about eligibility in signing up for SNAP and other services that we're not understanding right now, because we're in a very unique place in that people's job situations could be shifting pretty rapidly.
Yes,
and their rents may be up and they're at risk of losing their homes. It doesn't mean that there's not money exchange, but
yes.
I think that's a good question. I mean, you know, we know that there is food insecurity in a sliver of our district, in the part that is Chinatown.
And that may be increasing. And that may be increasing with COVID. But I would like to say that Patricia and I have been members since the beginning of the pandemic of a school food coalition. And as you know, through the summer, that food was available to anybody who wanted it. So we are still members of this coalition. And in fact, this week's meeting, Tish James is going to appear.
What's the
any information about food for any of our hungry neighbors, we can get for you. Additionally, did I hear you right? We only have 1,000 people who receive food benefits, EBT benefits.
You know what? I'm not entirely sure. I did a really cursory data look the other day.
I'm going to tell you that that's not remotely close to the number, because
what's the name of your coalition, by the way?
People in Chinatown, we're called Lunch for Learning. Many people in Chinatown receive EBT. And as of September, every single public school student who was enrolled in school last year received $420 in EBT benefits, which means that every family with public school kids in our entire district now receives food stamps. So they all have them. And the issue of the supermarkets not delivering, right? The issue is not that they wouldn't take
No, it's not. It wasn't
that they would not deliver it. But there is a very, and this has been an ongoing issue for many, many, many years for recipients, SNAP recipients, that there is a very limited amount of places where they can get delivery. And that was a bigger problem during COVID, and certainly a bigger problem with families who were sheltering in place, who had just received these dollars to make up for the money that, you know, they were now spending because their children weren't in school every day.
Good.
So,
so that's something we can look into.
Yeah, we would need to look at how many, because it's not 1,000. It's several thousand for sure. And that is, again, not including all of the public school families in our entire district. And that includes Chinatown. I mean, Chinatown, PS 130, right, Patricia?
Yeah.
They were doing 5,000 meals a day, almost every day through the summer.
That's actually how I came to this issue, because I heard that number and I was alarmed by it. And that's why I spoke to Margaret Chin's office. And yes, there is food insecurity in Chinatown, which is why I say, like, we need better representation of Chinatown on our board.
Right, but there were also other locations not so far from there where not one person showed up. PS 41 was a hub, is still a hub, and people really aren't coming in. I don't know what the disconnect is, because people were certainly traveling for these meals during the pandemic. But yeah.
Any other issues that you can think of? Food insecurity is one that I can look into.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, our new neighbors that will be in temporary housing, you know?
No, that's a big one. And actually,
how can we serve them and help them acclimate to our neighborhood and help our neighborhood acclimate to them?
Yeah, no, that's a very important subject that actually we've talked about. We had a meeting with CUCS, which will be running the Safe Haven, which is going to be called Paul's Place, I think. My interest in that is there's going to be an advisory council for that, and they're starting to collect names for that. The advisory council goes into action when the center opens. I feel strongly, and I feel this about the Project for Renewal as well, that they're going to have volunteers. They'll have volunteers, but my interest would be to broaden the public that engages with them. In other words, I think that there's a certain person who is going to volunteer and would volunteer under any circumstances. I would love to find mechanisms for broader bridges. So for example, I'd love to find a mechanism for students at PS 41 and PS 3 to be have opportunities to get to know this population in a way that reduces the us and them feeling and humanizes them. I mean, that sounds patronizing. I don't mean to be patronizing. I just mean that the people are afraid of homeless people, and they don't know many, and or any. And so I feel like there's a big opportunity, and I think the mechanism of that would be the advisory council and probably different communities on this board to find ways that, you know, people can meet them and they can meet people. And that's for this, the Safe Haven on 14th Street is going to be a different population than the one on 11th Street. The one on 14th Street is a drop-in center. And then there is this, you know, it's single adults. I think it's all men, but I'm not sure. And it's 24 beds. So that's one population. And then in a couple of years, when the center on West 11th Street opens, that is going to be a very different population. That's going to be single women who are either working or seeking work. And that to me is a whole different set of, you know, opportunities for getting to know people and for having engagement. So I think, you know, I feel like it's one thing to have people who are different than you in your neighborhood. Great. But if you don't ever talk to them, what's the point? So the hope is that we can create these, you know, threads of engagement. And I think that the mechanism for that is the advisory council, getting people on the advisory council who are interested in that.
Okay. One of the things too, I thought would, you know, because I've followed this with the two centers that are opening, and I'm really happy that they're happening. And first impressions are always so important. And one of the things that I was thinking that Community Board 2 could do, or present the idea that we can say, like, welcome to our community. welcome to becoming a part of us. And, you know, kind of instead of like acclimating each other, really just welcoming, like, and doing something, having some event or a series of events, or, you know, a week or things where the community, you know, reaches out and welcomes. And I think, you know, I think the community who gives, you get so much out of giving, and community, you know, and you receive so much positive. I think it will affect the way the community views the entrance, and also the way the new residents will view their new community. I
agree.
was thinking there could be some kind of event or series of events would be a great thing.
Yes, I agree with that.
We should talk to the people at the center and some of the residents if possible, and see what they need from us.
Right. Well, they're going to have, I mean, they're going to be, you know, they're not opening yet for probably another month or so. I'm not exactly sure what they weren't sure what their opening date was. They're going to have, as you probably know, health services, mental health services, you know, social work services. They're going to have a lot of services at the Safe Haven. It's not just a sleep air shelter. It's designed to lure street homeless in and try to get them engaged in services. I think that there's a population that's very difficult to engage, is what we've heard from our outreach workers. And so the Safe Haven is designed to make it easy to engage. So that
Just the way they put it, it's a place for the people that we know in our community who live on our blocks. That's their target audience, you know, are the people who live on our streets and who have been there for years, which we all probably know different people in different areas. They're trying to target the hardest to reach, hardcore street homeless, refuse to go in and accept, you know, any services from most people, that need 120 visits with them to, you know, start engaging and accepting, you know, seeing some of the most basic of services, clothing, for example. And, you know, I wanted to touch on something Susanna had said, which I don't think most people are aware, is that one of the largest group that engaged with that same population were the police, and the police are no longer involved in those interactions. And it's been frustrating to them because they don't know who to reach out to get the engagement sometimes, when they used to be the ones who were there, and without the homeless outreach unit, which used to be in our community board. So there's a big change that's happening in the way the city engages with that. And that's something that I think is important for everybody to realize, that we as a community might need to be a little bit more proactive on reporting folks so that homeless outreach can reach them. You know, is where that used to happen, that the police would see people and engage and begin an engagement, and that's not the case anymore. So I think we all need to have a better understanding of that and what that shift is. And it's new for the city, and as we know, I hear over and over, the city hasn't been doing a very good job in anything it's been starting of late. So, you know, we should try and figure out ways that we can help make that a better transition in our community, at least. And anyway, just going back to that target population of the hardcore street homeless, you know, I hope it's not increasing. I'm starting to see some more faces that are becoming familiar on different blocks, you know, and so the Safe Haven is a very particular place. And I think people, you know, knowing that that's their mission is important. It's a different audience, is I guess what I'm saying.
The way it was described to us is that the idea of the Safe Haven is you can come in and just get, you know, whatever, a cup of tea. And then while you're there, someone, you know, who's on the staff will try to engage them for something more, like, oh, you know, it looks like your shoes are worn out. Let me get you a new pair of shoes. And then while maybe they'll tell the nurse to bring the shoes, because then she'll notice that his foot is ulcerated and maybe she can get him to accept treatment for the foot. And then maybe they'll leave, and then maybe they'll come back and they'll be, so the idea of it is to put very little pressure and deliver a lot of services and hope that they can fold them in to the point where they can get an ID so that they can start to apply for housing, blah, 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 blah. I think that that population is going to be harder for us to engage, but I think that there's more opportunity at the safe haven for the people who will be living there for, they'll be there for like 6 to 9 months, I think. And I think we can have, a lot. I think this is a neighborhood that is interested in people and has a lot of kids and a lot of families. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to overcome people's nervousness about it.
I was going to say, I would like to make a comment or a recommendation. Like, we have our resources pages on our community board website, and I don't see a link for social services. Like, you don't have any links that would, if somebody was interested in, I didn't know we were gonna, well, I knew about it because you've written the resolutions about the 2 shelters that are gonna be in our purview. It would be nice to learn more about them and maybe let our community know ways we can assist or where we can find out more information, where to drop things off if they need things. If you could provide links or information about that to our community, maybe possibly on the website, like under the resources page.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think that Carter and I need to start talking about this advisory council and how to, get it. I mean, it's not our entity, it's their entity, but they are, they're eager to have names of people who would like to serve on it. And once that exists, provides a lot of structure that enables us to do all what you're talking about, Patricia.
Susanna, have they indicated that they'd like to have a community board representative on?
I don't know that they haven't been specific, but I'm sure that they would like one. Maybe
you should just ask them directly, because if they'd like an appointee from us, just let us know. Then we can go process of.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Keep stepping.
Yeah, and I was going to also say, just Patricia, the hard part is we start hearing about these things so early, and you can't really share information until they open. So even though we've been hearing about stuff for a while, they're not really at that spot yet where you can. Okay. I mean, they're still worrying about, finishing up the place and the mindless work that's in dealing with the bureaucracy. But one of the things I wanted to say is that how we do this is important in engaging with them, because we'd like to see more of these services in our community. And, one of the big impediments to that was simply the physical cost of rent, which is why we have very few social services. And, a lot of you have been around for a while and remember we used to have more social services that were on the western side of Bowery. We had the women's shelter that was over there. There are a couple of, halfway houses, things like that in the past. But, as times are changing and the distribution of services, it may be that the rents are come down enough that we have opportunities for other social services to be in our community. And so it's important that we engage in a positive way with these groups so that other people in our community are not as challenged with the idea of any of these services coming to our community. I used to live by the women's shelter for many years. I was on Lafayette Street, and to hear what we heard with some of the concerns and the amount of discussion that we had to have with the women's shelter that was opening in the village was, a bit of a challenge when, realize this is a great population that you're trying to help in getting jobs, and instead they're focusing on different things, and particularly when it's the size is not very large. You know, we have a lot of opportunities here. And so just a positive focus, I think, is important so that people can see that.
So the question
May I just
is,
make a point on this? I'm sorry, I am just on my phone right now. So when is
Yes,
a good
Katie.
time? Let me know, Patricia.
Go ahead, Katie.
What's so ironic about this is that as we became a more affluent community, some services sold their real estate at a great profit and left. We used to have the Children's Aid Society on what was it, Sullivan Street?
yes.
And I mean they left our neighborhood. They sold that property for a lot of money because there were no more poor children, they said, here to serve. But they were serving the children in our neighborhood through the preschool program and through the after school program that my kids both went to for a very long time.
I went to nursery school there. I went to nursery school there.
Of course. And then we had the Evangeline residence. The Evangeline residence, where was that? Dr. Smith might remember. It was like on 13th Street.
Yeah, it was on 13th Street between 6th and 7th.
Right, and it was for women. Working women could live there cheaply or reasonably, but that left too. So if we identify things that we want to keep, we ought to think about that too. I mean, how can we keep things that are doing good work in our community, and instead of losing them?
And I think the thing that I'm always looking for is what are the pockets of need? I mean, I think that, median numbers don't tell a full story. They tell you, a general profile, and they overlook people within that profile who don't fit the profile. So, but it's hard. It is a challenge to know where those needs are, which is why I would love any time you guys have an idea for it. We have identified certain things that we pay attention to. We pay attention to the methadone program and seniors and LGBT youth. And we pay attention to, obviously, we pay attention to eviction issues, although that's a complicated issue because there's a land use crossover there. There are a few things that are not top of mind that we pay attention to, but I would always love to broaden that to find out, to pull out where are those pockets of need that are not getting attention. And that made me think of something else. Oh, and public health. Public health is something that we also deal with, and we've been focusing a lot on COVID, obviously in the last year or so, more so in the spring when it was really a question of big numbers, and we're going to revisit that very soon. And then I feel like we always need to be monitoring the performance of the standalone emergency room, because that is a big deal in our district and a big change from when we had a hospital. So I've been trying to get attention on that.
I just wanted to jump in. One of the Susanna addressed this early on when she first started, that the committee doesn't deal with so much responding to issues that are legislative or anything, along those lines. Is that if it's always helpful, and Susanna and I have talked about this, but a lot of people don't always think about it this way. We want to think about issues before they're an issue, and really try to be at the forefront of things, because frankly, it's not very helpful when you're jumping in when something's in the moment or after the fact. And so, if you guys can think of issues before they really show themselves or become clear, it'd be very helpful to share that with Susanna,
Yes.
because then we can discuss those issues in advance with agencies or with different groups, and
proactive and advocate for them.
That's right, because I would anticipate that next year, as things get warmer again, really having a better understanding of who does street outreach for the homeless and how that's happening, going to be important because, you know, this is going to be a very hard winter economically. And we are a community where people live. And if the office spaces continue to be not as occupied, hopefully that won't be the case, you know, with the rollout of vaccines. But a lot of the street homeless tend to migrate to where people are. And so they come into, you know, we're not that far south. And so it's not out of this world to anticipate that we have a more of an influx of homeless. And so having a better understanding while it's cold of that and talking, we're ahead of the, you know, understanding what's going on and having those conversations, and particularly community groups understanding what's going on. So that's just an example. But if there are other things that people can think about, you know, if you have any ideas, let Susanna know or me know. And I know it's something we talk about in, you know, trying to come up with topics.
There's one other issue that I wanted to touch on, and it's been, I haven't really figured out how to get at it. There's a question about, you know, the land use committee and the social services committee, but I'm going to work with Adam Zeldin on our committee to try to get data on rent stabilized apartments and what ones that are leaving rent stabilization. So we have a grant was given by the Rudin organization when they built Greenwich, you know, on the St. Vincent campus.
Greenwich Muse.
Yeah, Greenwich Muse. As one of the mitigations, they did a 10-year grant contract with an organization called Mobilization for Justice, which provides free tenant representation in eviction issues. And we've had them into our meeting, to our committee, and they still have, I think, 3 years left on that contract. But what I have not been able to get, and apparently it's hard to get, but we are going to work on that, is just a profile of how many units do we have that are rent stabilized or rent controlled or, you know, in affordable programs. And we don't have a clear picture of that. And I think that would go also a long way to understanding our neighborhood a little bit better, because obviously people who are living in subsidized or low rent situations might be people who have greater needs. Or might not.
Susanna, there's no more.
Okay, Susanna.
Yes.
I can connect you to Sam Stein, who is housing policy analyst at the Community Service Society, and that's information that his unit has been helpful with in the past.
Oh, great.
So I'll introduce you. If that's okay, I can introduce you by email.
Absolutely,
okay.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Susanna, just so you know, there's no more units that can be deregulated. And that's part of the Tenant Protection Act of 2019.
Right, that's
and
true.
So it's more, you know, that we're not losing those units theoretically anymore.
Yeah. I just want a better understanding of what the housing is like in our district. I don't really have a clear understanding of that.
So between 2007 and 2020, Community Board 2, there were created 1,975 rent stabilized units. We lost 6,407. So we had a net loss of 4,400 affordable units.
What are you looking at? What
I'm getting this from a report that was done backwards from looking at tax filings.
All right. Well, send it to me.
But what we don't have is a complete list of how many actual units there are in the community board. But it's the situation with rent stabilized units has changed, where we're not losing them because there's no decontrol anymore. It's more of a matter of harassment or people not being able to stay in their housing, or issues of being able to afford to stay in what is affordable housing.
Yeah, there's an organization called Just Fix It New York that I will reach out to. They track this kind of thing.
Yeah, and one of the big things that we should also understand is if stabilized tenants have not been paying rent because they've been impacted by COVID, I think that housing courts started back up again. in having a better understanding about a negotiation on back rents and just educating people on that, of how do you get yourself out of the predicament, is important. Or, you know, just, and that's something that if we had Mobilization for Justice come in to explain what they're actually seeing on the ground, it would be really helpful, because I think it's something that people don't talk about. And, you know, a lot of long-term rent stabilized tenants in our community board, if you've talked to them, they've all been, quite a few of them have been harassed by their landlords over the years. I mean, I think people would be shocked how many people have been engaged, you know, in landlord tenant court or other issues with people. And so just understanding COVID's impact.
Yeah.
What I think
Also, the mayor's office also has a tenant protection arm now.
Yeah.
But our zip codes are not included. I mean, if you think about the city and you're starting a pilot program and you're trying to expand from there, you know, our zip codes don't make the top of the list. But
yeah, I mean, you know, Michael Wiggins had pointed out in the chat, and I don't think a lot of people are aware that if you've lost your job through this and you're in a rent stabilized situation, and you know, could very well be eligible for SNAP, you may be eligible for help, you may be eligible for a one-shot time deal on helping you deal with your rent situation.
Right.
And people who are living in rent stabilized units, it's really important, because that is affordable housing.
Yeah.
And if they lose that housing, they're really in a bad predicament. And so it's something that we may not always quite think of that population as vulnerable as certain other vulnerable populations. It's something we don't want people to lose their housing. And so that's, you know, to Mara's point about even just one person helping them out, that's really important to do. And I know a couple of people have asked me about housing situations, and it's a lot of people just don't know. They don't even know where to start or even where to ask. And because, like everywhere else, a lot of the organizations that do help people, the nonprofits, people are working from home, so their call-in lines are hard to reach. I think people are overworked. It's hard to get specifics about your own circumstances. And that's what Mobilization for Justice was given this money to help people in our community specifically. So getting them out in front to explain some of this might help. And Corey's got doesn't he have his upcoming discussion on tenants' rights or something? I think it went out in our last email blast.
I'm not aware, but he might.
Guys, thank you, Susanna, for coming tonight and telling us more about social services. Are you on the calendar for December or?
No, we're not on the calendar for December. We're bad at November and December because our meetings are always at the end of the month. So that's Thanksgiving and Christmas. So we have to, but we'll have a meeting in January and figure out what we'll do. Okay. Whether we might do a COVID relook, we might do, I want to talk to this guy from Hedrick Martin, and maybe we'll pull in Mobilization for Justice. So we will meet after that. Thank you guys for holding this meeting.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to make it. Thank you.
Thank you for, it's only because you guys are still around.
Yeah. And I want to be mindful of everybody's time. We're at 7:45 and we started at 5:30. We've gathered a lot of recommendations tonight and are looking forward to implementing them within CB2. And to everyone here tonight, always check our website from up-to-date information. We're going to be mindful about that. As well as letting everyone know here that Equity Working Group does not have a meeting in December either. So look out for our next upcoming meeting in January. And I'm gonna drop in the chat how to reach us if you have information you'd like to share with us in the future. And to our working group members, did you want to say anything before we sign off or anything? No. So can I get a motion to end the meeting?
I just want to thank our attendees, Darlene, Pete, and Michael, for
Oh, yes.
Running
Thank
this.
you. Thank you guys for hanging in there.
Thank you all.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Guys, good
Okay,
night.
good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. It's Lois. God
Good night,
bless.
Lois.